The photograph is the kind you'd ignore in a pile. Sepia, cracked at the corners, the emulsion fogged where a thumb once held it too long. It was found in a shoebox at the back of an estate sale in a Massachusetts mill town that used to smell like dye, steam, and wet wool. No caption, no date written in ink. Just a factory. 3 stories of tired brick, arched windows like dark eyes, and a smokestack leaning as if it had given up holding itself upright. On first glance, it reads as a familiar American ruin. Industry, then abandonment, then silence. But photographs don't only show what stood in front of the lens. They show what the photographer chose to include, what they cropped out, what they waited for. And this one feels waited for. The yard is too empty. Not just no people, but emptiness with intention. No carts, no horses. No workers lingering at the entrance the way they often did when a camera appeared. In 1905, cameras were not invisible. A factory crew would have stared back. Someone would have stepped into the frame, even by accident. Here, the ground looks stamped down and muddy, as if many feet passed through, yet no bodies remain to account for it. The door is shut. The windows are mostly broken. But one window on the second floor, right side of the building, a few panes in from the corner, looks wrong in a way you can feel before you can explain. Boards are pressed behind the glass from the inside, tight and uneven, like someone rushed and then regretted the precision. It's not the kind of boarding you do to keep weather out. It's the kind you do to keep eyes from looking in. When the photo is scanned at high resolution, the wrongness becomes a single, undeniable fact. In the narrow gap between 2 boards, there is a hand. Not a blur, not a shadow. A small hand, fingers curled with strain, gripping something metal that catches the pale winter light. It's a tag. A flat, rectangular ID tag, the kind factories use to assign lockers or track tools or label payroll slips. The metal reflects just enough to announce itself like a flash from a mirror, a deliberate signal, a mistake, or a plea. That detail changes the entire photograph. The mill is no longer a dead building. It is a building with someone inside it, pressing evidence against a window that was never meant to show anything at all. That's when Evelyn Hart gets involved. Local historian, archivist, the kind of person who doesn't treat old paper like nostalgia. She spent years tracing the town's mill families through church records and burial plots, trying to stitch names back into a place that was built to use people up. When she sees the scan, she doesn't start with ghosts or legends. She starts with logistics. "Second floor," she says, mapping the window onto a typical early 1900s textile layout. That's where you'd keep what you didn't want on the ground level. Storage, sorting, sometimes the infirmary corner if the owner was trying to look respectable, sometimes something else. A photograph conservator, Dr. Samuel Crane, confirms what the paper itself suggests. The print stock and tonal range fit the early 1900s, and the sharpness indicates a camera set on a tripod. Someone took time to frame this. Crane points out something colder than any rumor. The boards behind the glass were already in place when the shutter opened. That means the concealment came first. The photograph came after. So why take the picture at all? Evelyn goes back to the estate sale address and learns the home belonged to the grandson of a former mill bookkeeper. In the same shoebox beneath the photo, there's a rusted key on a twine loop and a brittle scrap of paper with a penciled number, half erased like someone changed their mind about leaving it behind. The hand in the window isn't reaching out for help in the way stories like to dramatize. It's holding up identification. It's saying, "I have a number. I am on a system someone wrote me down," which means someone could have erased it. The central question stops being, what happened to this factory? And becomes something sharper, heavier. If the town believed this place was abandoned in 1905, who was still inside? Why were they hidden? And what kind of operation requires a boarded window, a metal tag, and a silence so complete that it survived in the public memory for more than a century? And then, in the scan's deepest shadows, something else surfaces, so faint you almost miss it. A second glint near the hand like a chain or a clasp. Not just an ID tag, but something attached. something that suggests the person behind the boards wasn't simply trapped by circumstance. They were being kept. Evelyn's first move is to treat the photograph like a crime scene frozen mid-breath. She prints it large, big enough that the bricks mortar lines become a grid, and pins it to a corkboard in the town archive, under the same humming fluorescent lights that make every old secret look slightly more modern than it wants to be. Dr. Samuel Crane brings a loop and a kind of patience that feels surgical. He doesn't start with the hand. He starts with the paper. The surface sheen says silver gelatin, he explains, tilting the print until the light skates across the damage. And the edgeware is consistent with a contact print kept loose, not mounted in an album. Early 1900s is plausible, but what matters is this. The exposure is deliberate. Tripod, stopped down. Whoever made this wanted the building readable. He traces the window line with the tip of a pencil, never touching the photo. The boards behind the second-floor pane are not random scrap. You can see the straight grain, the fresh-cut ends, the nails evenly spaced, like someone measured in a hurry. And behind them, in that slit of visibility, the small hand has positioned the metal tag at the brightest angle it can find. Not accidental. Not just someone peeking out. A textile historian named Marjorie Keene, brought in because she grew up around mills and now studies their labor systems, recognizes the tag shape immediately. That's not a house key tag, she says. It's closer to what mills used for tracking: locker tokens, tool tags, sometimes payroll identifiers. If you lost it, you didn't just lose a number, you lost the ability to prove you belonged to the line. Evelyn hates the word belonged in that sentence, because it makes the factory sound like an owner of people, not just brick and machinery. But the phrasing fits the era too well. Keene asks for the scan at maximum resolution. When it's pulled up on a monitor, everyone leans in at the same time. 3 adults drawn toward a child-sized hand like gravity. The tag has a mark on it, not a name. Not letters you can read, but a darker stamp, maybe 2 digits, maybe a symbol. Crane enhances contrast carefully, refusing to invent details that aren't there, and still the impression remains. Something was pressed into that metal on purpose. Then the most unsettling practical question lands. How tall is that window from the floor? Evelyn pulls Sanborn fire insurance maps for the neighborhood, those old, brutally honest diagrams that cared about flammability more than dignity. The mill's footprint matches. The second floor, right side, aligns with an interior section labeled for storage and sorting. No stairwell nearby. No obvious reason for a boarded window, unless someone wanted that corner hidden from the yard. Keene adds another layer. If it's a textile operation, second floor right could be where you keep the vulnerable, the sick room, the rest area, the place you don't show inspectors, or, she pauses, careful, the place you keep workers who aren't supposed to be workers. Child labor is the obvious thought, and it's not even sensational. It's history. But Evelyn won't let the story settle too quickly into what's already known. The hand could be small because it belongs to a slight adult. The tag could be a tool tag. The boards could be storm protection. Every innocent explanation is possible, until you look again at the way the fingers grip the metal, knuckles tight, tendon strain visible even in grainy emulsion. That isn't a casual hold. That's desperation focused into a single gesture. A former state safety inspector, now retired and blunt with age, studies the layout and laughs without humor. If the public thought it was abandoned, he says, but there's evidence of internal boarding and controlled sightlines, then abandoned was a word used for outsiders, not for the people running it. Evelyn returns to the shoebox items, the rusted key, the pencil-scratched number on the paper. She measures the key's warding pattern against early 20th century industrial locks. Crane connects her with a locksmith collector who identifies it as a type often used for interior doors, not exterior gates. A key meant to keep something contained inside the building, not to keep strangers out. The penciled number is smudged, half erased, but not random. Evelyn searches mill payroll ledgers in the county records. Most are missing, burned in a courthouse fire decades ago, but a few fragments survive in private collections. In a brittle ledger from 1904, a column appears repeatedly. No, followed by two-digit identifiers. Not names, not addresses. Just numbers tied to hours, deductions, and something labeled simply, store, company scrip, company debt. A system designed so your wages could vanish before you ever held them. Evelyn circles the number from the scrap and compares it to the ledger's surviving pages. It matches one of the identifiers, and next to that entry, in cramped handwriting, is a note that doesn't belong in an account book. Transferred, second floor. No reason given, no injury recorded, no resignation. Just movement upward into the part of the building that the photograph shows being visually sealed. The photo stops being an eerie artifact and becomes a coordinate. And when Evelyn flips the ledger page toward the light, she sees something that makes her stomach drop. A faint indentation on the paper, as if the writer pressed too hard on the line above. Imprinted there is the same two-digit number, written again and again, like someone practiced it, or like someone was forced to remember it. Evelyn expects the archives to give her a clean line. A date, an incident, a name that turns the hand in the window into a person you can speak aloud. Instead, the archives give her what they always give when a town has decided to forget. Gaps that look accidental until you stack enough of them together. At the county clerk's office, the mill exists in property transfers and tax assessments, a neat chain of ownership, a predictable rhythm of valuation, then a sudden dip in 1905 that matches the local story of shutdown. But the paperwork never uses the word abandoned. It uses phrases like inactive and temporarily closed, the language of a machine pausing, not dying. Newspapers are worse. The town paper from that spring has a bright paragraph about a church picnic and a wedding announcement, and then nothing, where you'd expect even a small note about hundreds of jobs disappearing. No labor protest, no goodbye advertisement, no auction notice. Silence so loud it feels like a choice. Evelyn's first theory is simple: a private deal, a quiet closure to protect investors. She follows that into a dead end of polite corporate names and dissolved partnerships, the kind that evaporate on paper without anyone going to jail. Then she finds the hospital. Not a grand city hospital, just the county infirmary records stored in bound volumes that smell like old glue and disinfectant. Admissions are listed with names, ages, causes, crushed fingers, scalded skin, consumption, nervous exhaustion. When she searches the months around the supposed abandonment, she finds something that doesn't fit the pattern. A cluster of entries with no names, just numbers. The clerk who wrote them didn't bother with birthplaces or next of kin. Under occupation, the word mill repeats like a shrug. Under condition, the writing tightens, becomes vague. Malnourished, exposure, contusions, unknown cause. One entry, dated April 1905, reads, juvenile, injury to wrist, restraint marks. Evelyn rereads that line until it stops being ink and becomes a picture. A wrist rubbed raw by metal, a child's arm jerking against something that doesn't move. She takes the page to Marjorie Keene, who doesn't blink at the implication, only at the bureaucracy. If they didn't write names, Keene says, someone instructed them not to, or they didn't have names to give. In some systems, the number was the identity. Dr. Crane, careful as always, refuses to let them leap. He asks for the ledger scrap again in the scan. He overlays the penciled number from the shoebox against the faint stamp on the metal tag in the window. It isn't a perfect match. Too many artifacts, too much grain. But the shape aligns enough to make Evelyn's skin prickle. The same two digits, or close to them, appearing in three separate places. The payroll fragment, the hospital book, and a hand held up to a boarded window like a flare. Now she needs a human voice, someone who lived near the mill, someone who heard things that never made it into minutes and ledgers. She finds one in the form of a letter. A local family donates a bundle of correspondence to the archive after hearing Evelyn is working on the mill story. It's wrapped in ribbon, the paper browned and brittle, written in a looping hand that wavers with emotion. The author is a young woman in 1905, writing to her sister in a nearby town. She describes the mills closing the way people describe a lie everyone agrees to repeat. The gates locked, the yard emptied, the owners suddenly generous with sermons about hard times. Then, in a paragraph squeezed into the margin, she writes about nights when the building was not quiet. I heard the knock in the glass, she writes. Not the wind. Knocking. And once, a little metal shine, like someone wanted to be seen. Father says never look up there again. Evelyn's breath catches. The letter is not proof in court. It's something rarer. Permission to believe her own eyes. But even this doesn't tell her what the up there was. Storage? Sick room? Hidden dormitory? Something worse? She tries the state labor inspection files next, expecting a scandal, an investigator, a citation, a political fight. The folder for 1905 is thin. Too thin. A single page notes a scheduled inspection, postponed. Then the case is marked closed because the site is inactive. No follow-up. No visit recorded. No signature beyond an initial. It looks like nothing, until Evelyn notices the date the inspection was postponed. It's the same week as the hospital's unnamed admissions. She goes back to the photograph, because the photograph is the only thing that hasn't lied yet. Crane rescans the area around the boarded window and pushes the contrast in a narrow band, isolating reflections. The glass, dirty as it is, still behaves like glass. It holds faint shapes from inside the room. At first, it's just darkness. Then a vertical line appears, too straight to be a shadow. Another line. A curve. Evelyn leans closer, and the shape resolves into something she can't unsee. An iron ring mounted into the interior wall, just beside the window frame. Not decorative, not structural. A ring placed at arm height, positioned where you could secure a strap or chain, close enough that a person could be forced near the window, and close enough that a person could lift a tag into the light while still tethered. The little glint Crane mentioned before, the second flash near the hand, stops being ambiguous. It becomes the suggestion of a clasp, a link, a hardware truth. The mill wasn't simply hiding workers, it was controlling them, and suddenly, the boarded window doesn't look like storm protection at all. It looks like an improvised blindfold for a room that wasn't meant to exist in public space, built into a factory everyone could point at in daylight, and yet sealed behind a story the town repeated until it sounded like history. Evelyn doesn't publish the finding right away. Not because she doubts it, but because she's learned what towns do when you threaten a story they've used as insulation for generations. They call you dramatic. They call you disrespectful. They call you a liar with a scanner. So she shifts tactics. Instead of chasing gossip, she follows infrastructure. Who fed the mill, who supplied it, who insured it, who had authority to step inside and didn't. The Sanborn maps lead to a name stamped in the corner, the insurance underwriter. The underwriter's files, archived in a university collection 2 counties over, still hold correspondence. Thin onion-skin pages, carbon copies, the kind of paperwork that survives because no one thought it mattered. In a 1904 letter, the mill's owner complains about unreliable hands and increased losses, and asks whether a supervised lodging arrangement would affect premiums. A supervised lodging arrangement. Evelyn reads the phrase twice, hearing what it tries not to say. In the next folder, there's a sketch. Crude, not architectural, showing a second-floor corner partitioned off with a narrow corridor and a door marked with an X. Beside it, an inventory list. Cots, blankets, a bucket, a lock, and rings, iron, set. Rings. Not for machines. Not for hoisting. Set into a wall. The mill didn't just use children. It housed them. Controlled them. And if the town believed the place closed, that cover would have been the perfect camouflage for a private dormitory no inspector would think to inspect. The final piece comes from the only person left who can connect paper to blood. A man named Thomas Briggs answers Evelyn's letter after weeks of silence. He's in his 70s, voice brittle but steady, and he doesn't invite her into his home. He meets her at the archive, as if he wants the records to witness what he's about to say. His grandfather was the bookkeeper, the shoebox, the key, the photograph. Thomas brings one more item, A thin, leather-bound notebook with accounting columns on the left and something else on the right. Small, cramped notes written like confessions you can't afford to call confessions. They came at night, not on wagons marked by the county. Private. No names given. Numbers only. Keep them upstairs. Keep the window boarded. If asked, shut down. The handwriting tightens near the end, the ink heavier as if the writer was shaking. Boy tried to show Taggett glass. Someone saw. Orders. Move them before inspection. Key kept by me. Told to forget. Thomas doesn't cry. He doesn't perform grief. He looks at the notebook the way people look at a wound they've lived with so long they forget it's still open. My grandfather drank himself quiet, he says. He called it shame. Not his shame. The town's. Evelyn reconstructs what likely happened in the spring of 1905. The mill, facing scrutiny and profit pressure, entered an arrangement with a nearby charitable institution, an orphan home, a reform school, a county relief program. The children were supplied as labor, filed as wards, converted into numbers that could be paid in scrip and controlled with locks. The owners insulated themselves with the language of benevolence, housing, supervision, training. The boarded window ensured no one would see how training bruises a wrist. Then something broke the containment. A child's signal. A hospital intake line that accidentally wrote down restraint marks. A postponed inspection that wasn't postponed by weather but by warning. The mill staged its own death in daylight. Yard emptied, gates locked. The word abandoned circulated like a spell, while the upstairs room was cleared and the people inside were transferred out of sight. Out of town. Out of record. The photograph, Evelyn realizes, wasn't taken to celebrate the building. It was taken to capture the mistake. To prove that on the day the town learned to say closed, someone was still behind the glass, holding up the only thing they had that counted as identity. When Evelyn finally presents her findings to the Historical Society, the room is crowded in the way small places crowd when they sense a reckoning. Some faces harden, some go pale, a few look relieved, like a tension they couldn't name has finally been given a name they can fight. Not everything can be proven to a courtroom standard. The institution records are missing. The payroll ledgers are burned. The children's names were never written. That's part of what makes the story so violent. The system didn't just exploit bodies, it designed paperwork to outlive them. But the evidence that remains is enough to change the town's map of itself. A boarded window. An iron ring reflected in glass. A number repeated until it became a person's whole world. A key that opened an interior door no one wanted opened again. Evelyn doesn't end with closure. She ends with a decision. The mill site, long treated as an eyesore, becomes a memorial project, not to industry but to the unnamed. The photograph is framed with the scan beside it, the hand circled, the metal tag brightened just enough to be undeniable. Under it, a plaque bears the only honest title the town can offer now, known by numbers, uncounted by history, seen, at last, in the window.